The views expressed on this broadcast of the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT and Take12Radio.com are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship. Welcome to Walking Through the Big Book with Chris Schroeder and Monty Meyer. And now, here's those two guys who investigate prior to contempt, Chris and the Monty'man.
Welcome, family, to Walking Through the Big Book with your co-host, the Monty'man, and Chris Schroeder, all the way from the East Coast, via internet and telephone and all those marvelous new stuff that we are able to tap into these days, and so grateful to be able to do that. Chris, how are you doing there, my friend?
I'm doing great today, Monty. Everything is going real well over here on the East Coast.
The birds are singing on key, and the leaves are waving properly. Did you know the wind blows because the leaves in the trees are waving? It's true.
That's a good image. That's a good image.
Oh, man. So, once again, folks, we're so glad that you're with us. Our email address, by the way, is take12radio@comcast.net. And if you're on the page, unless you're listening on an MP3 player or a burnt CD or something like that, if you're on the page on the main website here, you will notice that there are several player buttons prior to this one. I think this is show 30, and those are all, they're in order for a reason, just like the steps, just like the traditions. And if you're listening to this, you've jumped ahead of it because it happens to be the current day. Please go back. That's fine, but make sure you go back to the very beginning and listen to these. And we welcome you to get friends around and sit around the computer and listen to the shows. The first 3 shows, by the way, you can download those free of charge. And then if you're interested in getting the rest of them, we are compiling these together, and very, very, very soon we will have these ready for you on an audio DVD, and because we want to make sure that they have that available for you guys. And it's going to be, now here's over 30 shows, my friends, it's only going to be $25. And that's unheard of. You go somewhere, Chris, and get a bunch of speaker tapes or whatever, and they come in those big cases. If you had 30 CDs in there, how much do you think somebody would pay for that?
It'd be about $160.
Yeah. And it's well worth it, my friends. And it goes to the finances aren't really going in our pocket per se. It's going to help the afflicted and affected, and Take 12 Radio to stay on the air, broadcasting to you the quality of recovery broadcasting. Right, Chris?
Absolutely. Quality and quantity.
Yeah, there you go. So where are we at, my friend?
Monty, we're about halfway down page 130 of the Big Book, and we're on the chapter, The Family Afterward. We have covered so much, and so often the last 4 chapters of the book kind of go unnoticed in Big Book workshops or where people are studying the book. And there's such a wealth of information, attitudes, outlooks, instructions, spiritual principles and practices. There's such a wealth of information that you can transmit into a positive experience in your life or the lives of others, that it's really a shame that it gets overlooked. So, when we decided to do this, Monty, we both kind of decided to pay some attention to these forgotten chapters.
Right.
And the chapter to The Family Afterward is very, very profound. I mean, currently, in this day and age, people are just coming to the terms with how much the family has to be involved in one's recovery. For many, many years, people thought that the alcoholic needs to go off, get treatment, come back, and be a better man. And every study that's done as professionals in addiction treatment get more and more experience, they understand that to some degree the family has become ill along with the alcoholic. And
sure.
Bill was so far-seeing. He was so perceptive. He saw these things in the family, and he understood they needed to be addressed. And we really just are coming to terms, I think, with how much they need to be addressed. You will now find interventionists and you will now find treatment centers that will not accept you as a client unless your family is willing to participate in the recovery process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really just starting to happen now in a large scale way. So that's how much importance people are putting on family involvement in recovery. I'm going to start reading about halfway down here. It says, one more suggestion. Whether the family has spiritual convictions or not, they may do well to examine the principles by which the alcoholic member is trying to live. They can hardly fail to approve these simple principles, though the head of the house still fails somewhat in practicing them. Nothing will help the man who is off on a spiritual tangent so much as the wife who adopts a sane spiritual program, making a better practical use of it. Again, we talked about this last week. If you really, really want to help the alcoholic in your family, well, this book is basically saying that probably the best thing you can do is start to work a spiritual program yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Start to practice these steps. Engage in a recovery fellowship, maybe a family groups or Families Anonymous or something like that.
Uh-huh.
That will be about the best thing that you can do. And you know what? A lot of times you're going to have to take that on faith because you're not going to understand why you have to do all this stuff when he's sick. You just need to take it on faith that the family has become ill, and when one person in the family really starts to recover, what happens is it sets in motion certain vibrations throughout the family that make it conducive to other people doing so as well. And again, you're going to get a lot of resistance from the families usually about, well, I'm not the one that's the problem. I've been picking up the pieces of this guy's life or this woman's troubles for so long. Don't be looking at me. And the fact of the matter is you have most likely become very, very ill being in the same vicinity of an alcoholic, especially
Sure.
if you've been living with them. So this book suggests that you start to practice some of the principles that are found in this book, that they're going to be helpful to you too.
Right.
There will be other profound changes in the household. Liquor incapacitated father for so many years that mother became head of the house. She met these responsibilities gallantly. By force of circumstances, she was often obliged to treat father as a sick or wayward child. Even when he wanted to assert himself, he could not, for his drinking placed him constantly in the wrong. Mother made all the plans and gave all the directions. When sober, father usually obeyed. Thus, mother, through no fault of her own, became accustomed to wearing the family trousers. Father, coming suddenly to life again, often begins to assert himself. This means trouble unless the family watches for these tendencies in each other and comes to a friendly agreement about them. I have seen this happen. There was a guy I was working with back in the 90s, and what happened was he came out of his blackout and he started to recover and he started to assert himself. He started to ask questions like, "Can I see the checkbook? What's the status of our investments? Things like that. Things
Mm-hmm.
the wife had taken care of for many, many years, and it exploded. She basically said, "Look, I've been doing this for the last 20 years. All of a sudden, you're going to come stepping in, saying you want to take over my dead body. Go back down to the basement where you belong, and where you've been for the last 20 years, acting like a drunken troll." And these kind of things can definitely happen. I like the instruction basically to come to a friendly agreement. I mean, talk about it. If you're just out of treatment and you're starting to recover and you want to pay, you want more involvement in the family. You think it's time. you need to have a talk with the family about that.
Yeah.
You can't just assert yourself. I mean, you have been looked on like a very ill failure for 20 years. All of a sudden, you're going to have an attitude like you know better than all these other people. There really needs to be a transitional period.
And that's like the husband that says, "Oh, okay, for the first time in years," says, "All right, everybody's getting up early Sunday, and you're going to church." They're like, "What?"
Yeah. You can be a little bit crazy in early sobriety. I mean, you're waking up brain cells that haven't been turned on in years, and you can be acting a little bit nutty. Just try to do no harm. Try to keep things cool. Try not to have arguments start. Try to stay out of things. Try to stay out of controversy and conflict as best you can, because you really are convalescing. You really are, and you're going to be convalescing, especially in your family role for quite a while.
Yeah.
Drinking isolates most homes from the outside world. Father may have laid aside for years of all normal activity, clubs, civic duties, sports. When you're drinking a quart of whiskey a day, Monty, you don't have a lot of time for PTA meetings, and charity drives. I got to tell you, I never came out of a blackout once heading up a charity drive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When he renews interest in such things, a feeling of jealousy may arise. The family may feel they hold a mortgage on Dad so big that no equity could be left for outsiders. Instead of developing new channels of activity for themselves, mother and children demand that he stay home and make up the deficiency. There is a huge amount of amends that need to take place. Both direct and living amends need to be taken care of within the family unit by the alcoholic or the addict who's practicing recovery principles. Absolutely. But that does not mean that if your family says you're staying here every night, that you should do so. If you don't become consistent at fellowship meetings, practice the steps with a sponsor, and find service commitments outside of your house, you're probably going to relapse. And so the choice needs to be, I need to find a certain type of balance with my recovery process and my family, or else I'm going to lose both.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be as compassionate as possible with our family, but that does not mean acquiescing to being at home all the time and having our schedule tied up completely with family stuff all the time. Not if we're recovering from alcoholism. The treatment for alcoholism is action, and if we don't have time to engage in that action, we're not treating our alcoholism. If we're not treating our alcoholism, God can't do God's job, and what happens is a relapse. So there has to be sensible balance.
And doesn't it have to be that way, and vice versa too? I mean, if we're going to 3 meetings a day, every single day for the last 6 months, and our family is suffering, I mean, part of our recovery is learning how to be productive members of our family as well.
Balance, absolutely. Yeah. There was this old timer in one of the fellowship meetings that I used to go to a million years ago. Everybody looked up to this guy because he gave great share. He sat there with a cigar. This is back when there were still smoker meetings. Sat there with a cigar, going, kid, let me tell you, kid, you gotta take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. And everybody loved this guy because he just gave great one-liners and. One-liners are not an effective defense against alcoholism, by the way, but everybody loved this guy because he was fun to listen to. Mm-hmm. And people looked up to him as an icon in this particular support group. Now, one day, he criticized somebody in the meeting, and the guy went right back after him saying, how about your family life? I see you at a meeting every single night for the last 20 years. Have you ever taken your wife out to the movies?
Yeah.
He just went after this old timer with 30 years. And the guy was right. The guy was right. You can't hide out in the meetings where it's all comfy cozy. The whole point of recovery is being able to get back out there in the world and to do the things you need to do where you need to do them and with whom you need to do them with.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the whole point of this.
Sure.
Do we need meetings? Yes. Do we need to be spending time on service commitments? Yes. But not absolutely 100%. That would not be practicing a balanced program. At the very beginning, the couple ought to frankly face the fact that each will have to yield here and there if the family is going to play an effective part in the new life. Father will necessarily spend much time with other alcoholics, but this activity should be balanced. Here we go. New acquaintances who know nothing of alcoholism might be made and thoughtful consideration given to their needs. The problems of the community might engage attention. Though the family has no religious connections, they may wish to make contact with or take membership in a religious body. Alcoholics who have derided religious people will be helped by such contact. Being possessed of a spiritual experience, the alcoholic will find he has much in common with these people, though he may differ with them on many matters. If he does not argue about religion, he will make new friends and is sure to find new avenues of usefulness and pleasure. He and his family can be a bright spot in such congregations. He may bring new hope and new courage to many a priest, minister, or rabbi who gives his all to minister to our troubled world. Now, Monty, you've got some personal experience with this.
Sure.
I mean, you make a great church member because of your spiritual experience and because of your experience and your spiritual awakening and the places you've been and where God is taking you now.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that true?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
We intend the foregoing as a helpful suggestion only. So far as we are concerned, there is nothing obligatory about it. As non-denominational people, we cannot make up others' minds for them. Each individual should consult his own conscience. You know, where I've found a lot of real comfort in my life. I think the steps basically are spirituality 101.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to take it up to the master's level, there are things that you can do. There are people you can study. There are places that you can go to participate. And I find the people that are really working a spiritual program find those things.
It seems to be true.
Many
yes.
people end up in church as really good members. Many people end up studying spiritual material.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I've done. I've got a library of spiritual material. I find great comfort in it.
Don't you think? Don't you think, Chris, that when we're doing this thing and we're really doing it the way it's laid out, we become hungry for that stuff?
It becomes comforting to us to engage in it.
Yeah.
That's the way I would put it. Many psychiatrists and many spiritual masters always talk about the God-shaped hole inside us.
Mm-hmm.
Our soul will not be at rest until it rests within God's hands.
Mm-hmm.
I think St. Francis said that or something. And those are very, very true statements. There's until we find a wholeness through spiritual practice, we're going to not be whole. And many people are going to move into a religious practice. They're going to move into spiritual practices, and they should. And this book basically suggests that it's a good idea. It says that to be an Alcoholics Anonymous member or to work these steps, you don't necessarily have to.
Right.
But you're probably going to be driven to it. You're probably going to be led to it. We have been speaking to you of serious, sometimes tragic things. We've been dealing with alcohol in its worst aspect, but we aren't a glum lot. If newcomers could see no joy or fun in our existence, they wouldn't want it. We absolutely insist on enjoying life. Now, those are some great promises. Those are some great statements of hope. I've got to tell you, the people that get through these steps, Monty, absolutely insist on enjoying life.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of joy and fun in their existence. There just really is. And every once in a while, if you find a group where it's just a complaint session or one person complaining about the misery of their life after the other, that's not what we're what we're supposed to be aiming at.
Mm-hmm.
If the newcomer is really an important part of your support group's mission, you're under an obligation to be providing an atmosphere where they see joy and where they see fun and then where they see people enjoying life. And I'll tell you what, if you have no joy, fun, or you're not really enjoying your life, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
There is a huge problem with your spiritual condition, and you need to go back and do the steps because you obviously haven't done them.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what I would say.
Mm-hmm. And people think lots of people think they have because they've been, quite frankly, they haven't been taught what really is going on in this book.
What I saw a lot of around my area, basically in the 90s, is people that went to step meetings, very consistently, really thought that they had worked the steps because they went to a lot of step meetings, and nothing is further from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
What I've found at step meetings basically is there are a lot of people that talk about the steps, share about the steps, think about the steps, philosophize about the steps, give their opinion about the steps. Rarely do I see anybody in those meetings that have ever really done them. It's the step book, although it's a great book, really was very, very damaging to the course of Alcoholics Anonymous when it was printed, because it took the focus off the book Alcoholics Anonymous. All of a sudden, step meetings popped up everywhere.
Right.
And instead of going to big book meetings or big book beginner meetings or speaker meetings where someone who had some real experience was sharing, they started to go to step meetings thinking that was working their program. And that's been one of the most damaging things to Alcoholics Anonymous in the last 40 years that I can say. We try not to indulge in cynicism over the state of the nations, nor do we carry the world's troubles on our shoulders. When we see a man sinking into the mire that is alcoholism, we give him first aid and place what we have at his disposal. And the first aid is basically, working, trying to engage him in the steps, getting him to the decision, placing what we have at his disposal is basically showing them how we have worked through the steps and encouraging them and helping them to do so also.
Mm-hmm.
For his sake, we do recount and almost relive the horrors of our past. But those of us who have tried to shoulder the entire burden and trouble of others find we are soon overwhelmed by them. I want to share a personal experience about that last sentence. There was a period of time where I was saying yes to everyone that was asking me, and I was making some waves in some of the support groups that were in my area. I was sharing a solution, and that went contrary to most people sharing their problems. So people would come up to me and basically say, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. Would you work with me? And I was saying yes to everybody. And there was a period of time where I truly had about 5 complete psychotics that I was working with, and a whole bunch of other people who were just conniving and hustling and leading me on to believe that they were serious about all this stuff, but really just using me as cover so that they could say, Chris is the guy I'm working with. And it got to a point where I basically had an emotional breakdown. The guy who was working with me, my advisor, pulled me out of the mix and basically said, I don't want you working with anybody. I don't want you picking up anybody else. I want you to just calm down and concentrate on yourself for a while. You're at your wit's end.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the mistake I had made, Monty, was I didn't qualify the people thoroughly enough, and I didn't give them instructions and then hold them accountable. And basically, what I did was, if they were going to meetings, if they were calling me, if they were telling me that they were busy doing the things I was asking them to do, I kind of let them slide. And really, I wasn't holding them accountable. They weren't doing the work. They weren't getting through the steps. They were just pillaging the fellowship meetings for whatever they could get. And I shouldn't have been working with them. And I learned from those mistakes. Their motivation was not to have a spiritual experience. and recover from alcoholism, their motivation was to get out of the jackpot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I've worked with people like that as well, and it exhausted me, man.
You know, and if you really look closely at the chapter Working with Others, and if you follow that as those principles as guiding, you're not going to get into that kind of trouble.
That's right.
You know, you'll qualify somebody right out the door right away. Listen, we're not on a membership drive as people taking people through the steps. We want to work with the people who are willing to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
We can't help the people that are not willing.
Yeah.
Yes, we can encourage them to not drink, but we can't offer them recovery if they're not willing to go through these steps.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So, we think cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. Outsiders are sometimes shocked when we burst into merriment over a seemingly tragic experience out of the past. You know, you'll be in a meeting, and somebody will say, "Yeah, I backed over a nun," and the whole meeting, you ran over a nun. I mean, if you were sharing that kind of thing at the Rotary Club, you would be asked to leave. Sometimes we have a very, very tragic sense of humor.
Yeah, kind of morbid,
Kind of morbid,
Yeah.
but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
But why shouldn't we laugh? We have recovered with an ED and have been given the power to help others. So absolutely, I laugh a lot. I take my program very seriously, Monty. I take my working with others seriously. I take a lot of things in my life seriously, but I don't take myself seriously. And if I can't find some humor sometimes in things, where is the joy? Where is the where are we going to find the joy in life? But there has to be some fun in all this, or I wouldn't want it.
Yeah.
One of the things that's really, really tragic is you'll go up to an alcoholic who's brand new, and you'll say, "Okay, kid, you just got to put the plug in the jug. You just got to not drink one day at a time." And a lot of times the newcomer's saying, no. Listen, alcohol did something for me. It's tearing my life up, but it takes away the terror. It allows me to leave the house. If you're going to tell me to just stop drinking, what else are you going to give me? What else is there here? You can't just tell me not to drink. I've tried that. You can't just tell me not to put the plug in the jug. I've tried that. The terror comes back. I'm not able to function. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm remorseful. I can't stand myself. Isn't there something else here? If all you got is not drinking, you can have it.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times that's really the unsaid attitude of the newcomer.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be better at painting the picture of recovery. We can't just put 12 promises up on the wall and leave it at that. We need to do a better job of showing that there is joy in life, showing that there is recovery, showing that your quality of life is going to get better every single year you're with us. So stay with us.
Enough
do a
people.
Better job at all that.
Enough people have already told us to quit drinking.
Yeah, well, I knew. Duh. And the first drink gets you drunk. Well, duh. I know that I can't get drunk if I don't take the first drink. How do you not take the first drink? How do you do that? Because every time I make a decision to do that, it doesn't work. So I must be different than you. This place must not be what I need. This isn't going to work for me. That's what a lot of newcomers are going to think if you just tell them to put the plug in the jug. We need to do a better job at explaining what this thing is all about. Everyone knows that those in bad health and those who seldom pray do not laugh much. To let each family play together or separately as much as their circumstances warrant. We are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. We cannot subscribe to the belief that this life is a vale of tears, though it once was just that for many of us. But it is clear that we made our own misery. This is about the 5th time this book says all of our problems are of our own making. We're responsible for all of it. God didn't do it. And again, this was a mistake I made. I thought, if there's an all-powerful God, Monty, he must hate me. Because look at my life. And the fact of the matter is every one of us has to come to terms in our own way with our own spiritual beliefs. But the belief that I came to is, God was offering me a path. I just wasn't paying attention to it. I learned in Sunday school how to act.
Yeah.
I just chose to ignore those spiritual principles and act selfishly and self-centered. That's what brought on my misery. God did not do it. God offered up a path for me really early on. I just decided to ignore it.
Yeah, sure.
Avoid then the deliberate manufacture of misery. But if trouble comes, cheerfully capitalize it as an opportunity to demonstrate his omnipotence. That's a great statement right there.
That is awesome.
Trouble comes to you. Financial trouble. If any kinds of trouble come, getting through it is going to demonstrate that the power of God is working through you.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard in meetings, well, here I go again, and I know that these problems are of my own making, period. and they don't go any further. And certainly not to cheerfully capitalize it as an opportunity to demonstrate, God. That's for sure. And it's like, well, why are you stopping at that? I mean, if you know you're that miserable and you know this is of your own making, and you're admitting that God didn't do it, do you not want to recover? And I think there are folks, Chris, that simply don't want to.
There are people that don't want to. There are people that are unconvinced that this path will help them.
Yeah.
And there are people who are constitutionally incapable. They suffer from real severe, mental difficulties. But what I get tired of is the people that come up and say, I'm doing it again. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yes, you do know what to do. You know that these steps work. You know that your character defects, it takes some there needs to be a certain type of participation for the removal of your character defects, and you're not participating. You're not working the step. You're not inventorying on a constant basis. You're not admitting it to your fellows. You're not making amends for the harms that you continue to cause. Don't tell me you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
The first meeting you ever go to, they read how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me you don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you just say I'm lazy and I'm obstinate and I refuse to take the castor oil because I don't like the taste and I'm going to suffer the consequences. It's my responsibility. Say something like that. That's closer to the truth than I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, about health, a body badly burned by alcohol does not often recover overnight, nor do twisted thinking and depression vanish in a twinkling. Remember that Bill suffered from depression. He would definitely be diagnosed with clinical depression if they had such things back in the 50s. There were many days when Bill Wilson himself could not get out of bed. He would pull the covers over his head and he would not leave his bedroom. A lot of the writing of the 12 and 12 took place during those periods of depression, by the way, when he could not get out of bed. He would have Lois bring him a pad and pencil, and he'd do his writing in bed. I mean, he suffered from unbelievably powerful depression.
Yeah.
He started to get involved with LSD. He started to get involved with vitamin B therapy to try to help some of this depression. And really, one story I hear, and I can't corroborate this, but it came from somebody that I respect a whole lot. Basically, the story was this. Dr. Bob pushed up on him one time. It wasn't Dr. Bob. It was some of Dr. Bob's people out in Akron. Pushed up on him and said, "Bill, why don't you go through the steps again? When was the last time you went through the steps?" And he was able to practice some of the principles and get out of his depression. Now I've only heard that from one source. I usually don't like to quote something that only comes from one source, but but there's at least a lesson in it. Even if it's not true, there's truth in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know a lot of people come up to me who've been around and been sober for a million years, and their life just is completely in the toilet, and they ask to go through the work again because they know that there's some power in this work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who went through the work at 20 years, 30 years, whose lives started to take off at that point. So anyway, and a body badly burned. Personally, I suffered from such malnutrition. The only calories I was getting was from alcohol for the last 5 years of my drinking. I rarely ate, and when I did, I would eat like a bacon sandwich or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Horrible health practices. And what happened to me was I stayed at about 135 pounds for about 5 years.
Wow.
Before my body started to heal and I started to gain weight. I'm at around 195 now. I probably could lose a couple of pounds, but I'm much more. I was emaciated when I first came in, and it was I was just there wasn't anything there, and it took a while. It took a while. So the body can take a lot longer than the mind or the spirit to recover.
Mm-hmm.
We are convinced that a spiritual mode of living is the most powerful health restorative. It was for me.
Yeah.
We who have recovered from serious drinking are miracles of mental health, but we have seen remarkable transformations in our bodies. Hardly one of our crowd now shows any mark of dissipation. But this does not mean that we disregard human health measures. God has abundantly supplied this world with fine doctors, psychologists, and practitioners of various kinds. Do not hesitate to take your health problems to such persons. Most of them give freely of themselves, that their fellows may enjoy sound minds and bodies. Try to remember that though God has wrought miracles among us, we should never belittle a good doctor or psychiatrist. Their services are often indispensable in treating a newcomer and in following his case afterward. Now, one of the things that I do for a living, Monty, and as you well know, is I basically do a webcast with addiction professionals, many of them psychiatrists, many of them doctors, almost all of them professionals in addiction and alcoholism treatment. And so what I say comes from the combined experience of many of them. With the changes in mental health today, the pharmaceutical companies are really, really pushing and marketing at a heavy rate a lot of different medications. And I still believe that there are good doctors and good psychiatrists. Don't get me wrong. But if you're a newcomer and you get sober and you go to a doctor or psychiatrist prior to going through the steps, you are going to be presenting with symptoms that mimic or are even actual, situational depression, anxiety, sociopathic behavior. You're gonna present with a myriad of psychiatric issues, okay, that may just be untreated alcoholism.
I agree.
May just be your spiritual condition is in the toilet so bad that you look like you're manic depressive. You could come off with 100 diagnoses from 100 different doctors. Okay, you need to, if you are going to go see a doctor or a psychiatrist, I highly recommend going to one with an ASAM approval, American Society of Addiction Medicine. I highly recommend going to somebody who specializes in the treatment of addictions. I do, because a doctor or a psychiatrist treats the symptoms that present. And they're not going to know the difference between actual psychological problems and psychological problems that are stemming from your alcoholism. Even if you tell them, a lot of times they're not going to. So if you're working with me, I'm going to want you to go through the steps. I'm going to want to see what gets treated spiritually. And then if problems still arise, let's go see the professionals. Okay. Now, if you go through treatment, a lot of professionals will be right there with you from the very beginning, and a lot of them have been understand the treatment of addictions and understand that abstinence from all drugs is preferable to maintenance on some drugs, and you're going to be in good hands. But you can't just go to your family doctor 5 minutes after you got sober, because what's going to happen is they're going to prescribe 35 different drugs to you that you may or may not need. You don't know yet. You know, you haven't recovered yet. You know what I'm saying?
And the big danger there is you go in, and I've seen this happen. I'm sure you have too. You go in, they diagnose you, let's say, with bipolar disorder, maybe even schizophrenia. I mean, I knew people that were so just their bodies just soaked with alcohol that they were hallucinating, they were talking to themselves, the whole 9 yards. You go in there, and let's take bipolar for instance, and they start giving you medication for bipolar disorder, and you still haven't detoxed from alcohol. And after you have detoxed from alcohol and you've been in the program, and now you're all medicated up, and with medicine that you didn't need, and now you've got what they call the accidental addict. Now you're addicted to a fixer or an antidepressant of some kind, and now we have a whole nother mess.
You know, what I see is probably half the guys I've ever worked with have been irresponsibly diagnosed with bipolar. Okay? Now, some of them had clinical bipolar, and have been able to recover with that bipolar and continue to stay on medication. But if you ask some of the experts, or if you look at some of the statistics, you'll see that alcoholics are about as likely to have bipolar disorder as normal non-alcoholics. Okay, so look at the amount of people in your support group meeting who are on meds for bipolar. You're going to probably find 30% of them. Now, obviously, if the statistics are correct, a huge majority of them have been misdiagnosed. Okay,
yeah,
I mean, it's just a fact. These are the professionals that do it are operating to the best of their ability. They are treating symptoms that present in these individuals, and they're treating them appropriately. It's not the doctor's fault. It's the alcoholic's fault for going to them too quick, or for not checking to see if they really have very, very serious experience with addictive illness. The doctors that have really serious experience with addictive illness will know that these are not symptoms of bipolar. They're symptoms of spinning dry. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem out there because once you've become once a doctor has told you you're bipolar, you're going to tend to believe that. But I am telling you, 50% of the people I work with have found that they weren't. After they worked a recovery process and then had to wean themselves off the drug. And again, I don't know that there's anyone to blame. I think the blame, if at all, it needs to go on the alcoholic or the sponsor or the spiritual advisor. You just need to be careful, and you need to understand that you are, if you're in your first 30 days and you haven't worked the steps, you are supposed to be depressed.
Yeah.
You are supposed to have high levels of anxiety. You are supposed to have terror. You're supposed to have depression and remorse and guilt and resentment. That's what you're supposed to have. That's part of your illness. And you don't treat alcoholism with bipolar medication. You treat alcoholism with a spiritual recovery process. So it's a complicated thing, and many people are going to get it wrong. They're going to continue to get it wrong for years to come, unfortunately. But what we can do as experienced sponsors or spiritual advisors is, we can try to explain to these people how your unmanageability presents, how your untreated alcoholism is supposed to present, and what the treatment for it is in the 12-step recovery modality. We're not doctors. We can't really tell whether someone is clinically anything, as a sponsor or a spiritual advisor. So, when in doubt, go to a good doctor, go to a good psychiatrist, but go to one who specializes in addiction treatment.
Yeah.
Don't go to the Yellow Pages, for God's sake. And it might mean some travel. It might mean 400 miles to go see your psychiatrist. That's just too bad. You need to do this responsibly, or else you are going to be in real trouble. Sometimes if you get prescribed heavy enough medications, lithium and stuff like that, sometimes if you get prescribed that, incorrectly, it's going to interfere with your spiritual recovery process.
Yeah.
So, I've been up on my high horse, and I want everybody to know I am not a doctor, not a psychiatrist. I have no professional expertise in this. I only know what I see and what I've experienced and the experience of the people that I've worked with. That's all I know. Okay?
Okay.
And, I listen to a lot of the professionals. So not all of, what I just said is non-professional. A lot of it, a lot of the people that I've talked to, some of the people you've had on your show will say the same thing that I just said.
Yep.
Anyway, one of the many doctors who had the opportunity of reading this book in manuscript form told us that the use of sweets was often helpful, of course, depending upon a doctor's advice. He thought all alcoholics should constantly have chocolate available for its quick energy value at times of fatigue. He added that occasionally, in the night, a vague craving arose which would be satisfied by candy. Many of us have noticed a tendency to eat sweets and have found this practice beneficial. That's fine for early recovery, but they are finding a high level of diabetes associated with alcoholism.
You betcha.
Because of the amount of sugar in alcohol. So you need to also be careful there. You need to, don't go crazy and just eat candy. Okay, here we go. A word about sex relations. Alcohol is so sexually stimulating that to some men that they have overindulged. Couples are occasionally dismayed to find that when drinking is stopped, the man tends to be impotent. I've never found anybody admitting to that, Monty. Any of the guys I know. But let's say for a minute that it's true. Unless the reason is understood, there may be an emotional upset. Some of us have had this experience only to enjoy in a few months a finer intimacy than ever. There should be no hesitancy in consulting a doctor or psychologist if the condition persists. We do not know of many cases where this difficulty lasted long. You're in shock, your first 30 days sober a lot of times, and, your body's not going to be reacting normally. So,
right.
Just don't worry about some of that stuff. Keep your priorities on meeting steps and service. The alcoholic may find it hard to reestablish friendly relations with his children. Their young minds were impressionable while he was drinking. Without saying so, excuse me, they may cordially hate him for what he has done to them and to their mother. The children are sometimes dominated by a pathetic hardness or cynicism. They cannot seem to forgive and forget. This may hang on for months, long after their mother has accepted Dad's new way of living and thinking. I've seen children who haven't talked to their mother or father for 10 years because of what happened during their alcoholism.
That's rough.
So it's not up to you when they forgive you.
Yeah.
You need to make direct amends as best as possible, and then try to establish living amends and be the best father you can be, the best family member. But you can't rush their forgiveness. You can ask for it, but you can't rush it.
Mm-hmm.
In time, they will see that he is a new man, and in their own way, they will let him know it. When this happens, they can be invited to join in morning meditation, and then they can take part in the daily discussion without rancor or bias. From that point on, progress will be rapid. Marvelous results will often follow such a reunion. Remember, in Step 11, it talked about morning meditation.
Yeah.
Okay, prayer and meditation. They expect, at this point in time, the father is doing it and has convinced the wife to do it, or vice versa. If the children are still mad at Dad, they're not sitting in on morning meditation. But when they forgive Dad, they should. The morning meditation is a family practice. That's what they're recommending. Now, is it absolutely essential to have the entire family do the morning meditation and evening review with you? No, not necessarily. But they're expecting that you've asked them to do so, and you've encouraged them to do so at least a little bit. That's one of the most forgotten things today, I think in the 12-step programs, fellowships, is the morning meditation, the evening review. A majority of members don't do it.
We talk a lot about it, but we don't do it.
What's that?
We talk about, waking up in the morning and then going to bed at night. I hear it all the time. But truth be known, how many of us use the excuse, well, I don't have time, I got to get to work, I got to blah, blah, blah. And at night, I'm just too tired, man.
I pray when I'm in the car commuting to work in the morning.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, let me tell you something. No,
okay? Exactly.
It should be about the business of driving that car, because I might be on the road too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do the prayer and the meditation with God, and if the family will do it too. But don't tell me you're doing the 11th step while you're driving to work, please. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether the family goes on a spiritual basis or not, the alcoholic member has to, if he would recover. Remember, they used to say the morning meditation and evening review were essential. Meetings were desirable. I mean, that's how much importance the early AAs put on that practice. The alcoholic member has to, if he would recover, live life on a spiritual basis. The others must be convinced of his new status beyond a shadow of a doubt. Seeing is believing to most families who have lived with a drinker. Here is a case in point. One of our friends is a heavy smoker and coffee drinker. There was no doubt he overindulged. Seeing this, and meaning to be helpful, his wife commenced to admonishing him about it. He admitted that he was overdoing these things, but frankly said that he was not ready to stop. His wife is one of those persons who really feels there is something rather sinful about these commodities, so she nagged, and her intolerance finally threw him into a fit of anger, and he got drunk. Of course, our friend was wrong, dead wrong. He had to painfully admit that and mend his spiritual fences. Though he is now on a most effective member of Alcoholics Anonymous, he still smokes and drinks coffee, but neither his wife nor anyone else stands in judgment. Remember that as this is being written, Bill Wilson chain smoked and drank 45 cups of coffee a day. Okay, in this day and age of health consciousness, we understand that smoking and drinking coffee, overindulging in either one of them, is really, really a bad thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I want to quote a statistic here, Monty. If I haven't quoted it before, I'll quote it again. 52% of the people who get sober, all right, let's say they come into AA and they get sober, for the rest of their lives, they're sober. 52% of them are going to die from nicotine misuse. Nicotine misuse kills over half of the people that get sober in AA.
Wow.
So, did Bill know that at the time? It was only until the 50s when basically the studies started to come out about how bad smoking actually was. So you got to take these. You got to understand a lot of this stuff in context. He's writing in the 30s, where they used to have doctors do the commercials for a doctor would say, "I smoke Camels."
Yeah.
The doctor recommends Camel cigarettes.
I remember that. Yeah. I mean, I don't remember it personally, but I remember the old Abbott and Costello, the old tapes I'd listened to that my dad had, and they would go to commercial. And they would have doctors say that, or they would say, we're raising money to send cigarettes to our doctors on the war front.
Yeah. More doctors recommend Chesterfield than any other cigarette.
Yeah.
I mean, that was going on. That was going on up until the time I started watching TV, and it was only, I think, in the early '60s or so where they started to stop that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
She sees. She was wrong to make a burning issue out of such a matter when his more serious ailments were being rapidly cured. That's true. Take things in perspective. What's the most important? The most important thing is someone is recovering from alcoholism. Don't nag him. Don't bust his chops about every little thing. You are absolutely, if that person recovers, he's going to be in the minority, and you're going to be very, very lucky to not have to bury him.
Mm-hmm.
Like most alcoholics or drug addicts, most alcoholics or drug addicts get buried way before their time.
Yeah.
We have three little mottos which are apropos. And remember, these mottos are about, in the context of the family unit, okay? A lot of times they throw the mottos up on the wall, and people think that following those mottos is working a program. There can't be anything further from the truth.
Yeah.
But these mottos, in context, within a family unit, are first things first, live and let live, easy does it. Okay, in the context of the family. In the context of the alcoholic, first things first. Well, I don't know about you, Monty. I always did the seventh thing first. live and let live. I used to just get even with people is how I used to live. And easy never did nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so take these mottos in the context that they were laid out, and they've basically been laid out for the family members. First things first is father's alcoholism. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that he needs to do. Live and let live. Let him do what he needs to do to treat his alcoholism, and easy does it. Don't be all over the guy about every little thing. And you can expand the meaning of these slogans to whatever degree you want to. But my thoughts on slogans basically is that if you give a slogan to a brand new alcoholic, he'll misuse it.
Oh yeah.
He'll basically say, first things first is I'm watching TV. Live and let live. They're telling me to do all this stuff. I'm doing it my way. And easy does it means I'm not going to be getting a sponsor today.
Yeah.
I got to take it easy. So again, I'm not a huge fan of the slogans. People have found marvelous benefits in remembering them and trying to apply whatever principles they have toward those slogans. But I've done enough work with newcomers to know that they're more harmful than helpful in most cases.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And I there's a gentleman, bless his heart, he's been sober 30 some odd years, and it's really, I have to chuckle. He's a great guy, but he always says, I don't read the book, and I've never done the steps, and if you'll just read the stuff on the walls around here, you'll have a pretty good chance.
Well, you only know what you only know.
You only know what you only know.
He's probably a heavy drinker and thinks he's an alcoholic, and that is as it should be. But the program of recovery is not a program of slogans; it's a program of steps.
Yeah.
And we would do well to remember that. And of course, there's going to be cranky old timers who've never done the steps.
Sure.
And when it comes to somebody sharing their real experience on a step, they're going to say, "Kid, if they would have told me I would have had to do all them steps, I'd have been right out of here. You know what you got to do? You just got to not drink it. You just got to come to these meetings. And that's what I did." And that's what they did, and that works for them. And there's nothing really wrong with that, except that their alcoholism is at a state of, it's either heavy drinking or it's a mild case of alcoholism. Because if a real alcoholic, if a hopeless alcoholic tries that, they're going to fail at it. And a lot of times the real damage that's done is the old-timer doesn't understand the scale of alcoholism and doesn't understand he's way up on the scale. He's not a low-bottom alcoholic. Low-bottom alcoholics have a whole, they're going to need to approach this thing in a whole nother way, besides the way he's doing it.
Sure.
And a lot of times these guys been around 20, 30, 40 years, and you can't tell them nothing.
No, you can't.
They think it, because they did it some way, that's the way you should do it. Kid, it took me 4 years before I put pen to paper in a 4-step. And I think anybody that puts pen to paper before 4 years, they haven't even gotten their head out of their back hind. I can't see how anybody would be able to do a decent job on a 4-step before they have like 4 years. That's somebody sharing, their own really faulty experience, thinking that because they got away with it, everybody else should. And again, that's really where the damage comes in, with the slogans and the wisdom sayings and the keep it simples and all that.
Well, we have finished up the family afterwards. Next week, we're going to be in Chapter 10, folks, to employers. And this is, these chapters, the family afterwards, and to wives, working with others, and to employers, they have so much in common, weaved in amongst themselves, about how to work with somebody, how to react to somebody, how to not react, suggestions on how to get along, to help somebody promote their personal recovery and come alongside them, or maybe let go. They all have that same kind of thing going through them. So these are really important chapters, my friends. Again, a wealth of information. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Monty. It's been a blast.
It has been a blast. Don't miss it, my folks. You don't want to. You just might miss something really cool. Until our next broadcast of Walking Through the Big Book with Chris Schroeder, this is the Monty'man and Chris, and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.